On this episode, I'm talking all about cap rates. Hey everyone, welcome to the 14th episode of Ballin with Spaulding. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate your attention. Please hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that yet. Subscribe so that you will be alerted when we drop new videos and new episodes. Share this with your friends. We want to create a wealth building community. Leave comments, ask questions, and let's get into the show. Remember the previous couple episodes, I'm not going to go over it, but the previous couple episodes we talked about the income for the properties, we talked about operating expenses. Go back and review it if you need to catch up, because I'm not going to spend my time there today. But once you take away the operating expenses of the property, which do not include the financing, once again, go back to the previous videos, you'll understand it. Take away the operating expenses away from the income, that's going to leave you with your net operating income. So the net operating income is really the income from operating the building. All right, and so when we're talking about cap rates, the net operating income is what's used to figure out a cap rate. And then you have a cap rate of an area, so you can figure out the price of a building that you want to list, or you can compare a listing to the surrounding area by finding the cap rate. So it's kind of an inverse, but let me find the right page here. Doodled some stuff up. So for an example of a cap rate, and the cap rate is basically going to show you the return on your investment if you do not finance it at all. So if you don't borrow any money from the bank, if you don't do the traditional 20% down, 10, 20, 30% down on a building, and finance the rest, if you don't do that, so if you just pay all cash for the building, the cap rate is going to be your return on all that cash without financing, if that makes sense. So let's say we have a $200,000 list price, and let's say that it brings in $3,000 a month income. Let's say the operating expenses are $1,500. This is monthly. So a net operating income per month of $1,500. Well, 12 months in a year, multiply 1,500 by 12, you have $18,000. And $18,000 is the net operating income. That's your income that you can pocket or whatever. If you didn't have any financing. So if you did have financing, the mortgage interest and the mortgage principal would still come out of this. Once again, if you paid for the whole building in cash, this is what you're going to have left over at the end of the year to distribute to yourself or reinvest or whatever. So once you find out your net operating income, the cap rate is simple to find, is a simple equation, right? Here comes some algebra and stuff like that. Net operating income divided by price is going to give you your cap rate. So when you take $18,000 and divide it by $200,000, it's going to give you 9%, which that's a pretty good little return, right? So in an upcoming episode, we're going to talk about financing and everything. If you finance this, your return on investment might be up towards 17 to 25%, somewhere in that range. So you can really, by leveraging and by borrowing, you can really see a higher return. But this is a great way to measure up like properties. Is a great way because, so for example, someone that is uber wealthy, they're going to probably be able to get better financing terms, right? So that's not really comparing apples to apples. So what the cap rate really allows you to do, and the net operating income, the price, the cap rate, what that really allows you to do is compare apples to apples. So buildings, you can compare different buildings in the area without taking into account financing, because you might get different financing. You probably have a higher percentage interest rate than someone that is a very established real estate developer that has billions of dollars worth of property. They'll probably get a lower rate. So it really takes all the guesswork out of it, and it really allows you to compare areas of real estate. So now what you can also do is you could take the cap rate of an area and multiply it by a price that you see online and find out which price you got to be at to get to the net operating income that you want to be at. So once again, this is kind of some formulas that it's kind of hard to conceptualize, because when I first started learning this stuff, I really didn't know how to really realize it in my head. But when I started going out and looking at properties, and I started doing this with actual properties I was looking at and the actual properties that I bought, it really started to make sense to me. And so now I can just almost plug numbers in my head and see the numbers in my head and know what the cap rate is, know how that cap rate compares to other buildings in the area, or even city to city, to find the best deals. a lot of times when you see cap rates up around 9, 10, 11, 12%, not always, but sometimes, well, yeah, I guess always, it'll either be higher risk or it's more of like a niche market. So the higher you see a cap rate, the better the better return it's going to be for the buyer. So if a buyer is getting a better return, the odds are it's a little bit more in a niche or it's a little bit more risky. Because someplace like, if you look at all the properties lined up on Fifth Avenue in New York or Michigan Avenue in Chicago, a lot of times if those properties get to market, which is very rare they do because they usually sell, off the market because of relationships that are built. But if those ever get to market, what you're going to see a lot of times, and even in bigger cities, more populated areas of less risk in real estate, you're going to see lower cap rates around 3, 4%. Places like San Francisco, you see cap rates of 3 or 4%, which isn't as good as return on your money because it's less risky. So higher the cap rate, usually it's more niche market or a little bit more risky. Lower cap rate is probably a little bit more safety there. But yeah, that's kind of how it boils down. And if I'm someone I'm selling a building, the lower the cap rate is, the better deal that I'm getting. The higher the price will be on the building. The higher the cap rate is, I don't want to say the worse deal I get, but the less I'll sell the building for, if that makes sense. So ways that a cap rate can improve. So for example, I went into say for example you went into a neighborhood that wasn't the safest investment at the time, and say all the buildings in the area are selling, whatever, for a cap rate of 12%. So it might go off as ding, 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 there's a little bit of risk here. But what could happen over time is that cap rate could come down by improving the neighborhood. So if you and some other investors improved that whole neighborhood, and then along came, 6 years later, along came a Starbucks and in the area, and there was a nice park, and it was really a place to be desired, what would happen is that cap rate would go down. And so that person that initially bought it at 12% cap rate, and if he sold it at a 6% cap rate, he essentially doubled the price or doubled the value of the property